Hello and welcome to the Center for Open Science and our webinar today, which is OSF for Organizations, where we'll do a brief overview of some of the paid services that we provide for research organizations and institutions, including OSF institutions, OSF registries, OSF collections, and OSF preprints. Just a few kind of housekeeping things as people trickle in. If you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. That'll help us keep track of answers and the questions. If you need to jump off of this early, that's fine. We'll be emailing all attendees and everybody who registered with the recording of the webinar as well as the slides. And some other information. If you have any questions for us after today and they're specific to something I've said or specific to membership or some of the services that we offer, feel free to reach out to either myself or our member services manager, Gretchen Gigan. Gretchen also has a lot of expertise in and around our metadata schema, which she was instrumental in building on the OSF. If you have questions just specifically about the OSF and your individual account or things like that, we also have a help desk, which I actually don't have linked here, but perhaps Gretchen, you can drop the link in for our help desk. And I want to just introduce myself. My name is Nadia Ortelt. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager at the Center for Open Science. So if you are interested in moving forward with one of our paid services that sit on top of the free OSF, you'll probably be talking to me first, or possibly Gretchen. And if you have any questions that are not answered by the time we get to the Q&A, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A section at the end to answer those questions. And also just a quick note about audience. We're really directing this towards anybody who might be in a kind of research support position or who might be thinking about coordinating research, both in terms of outputs, but also project management of research. So if you are a librarian or you're research support staff in any way, this is the place for you. If you are just a researcher also who is curious about some of these tools, this is also the place for you. So we're just going to do a really quick Zoom survey to gauge your familiarity with both the OSF and then whether or not you have an OSF account. And if you're familiar with OSF institutions, which is one of our more popular products that we'll be talking about today. So I think Teresa, who is on our team, will be launching that poll. Feel free to fill it out. And that just helps me understand how familiar everybody here is with the OSF. So as that is trekking along, and I can see that majority of people have not made an OSF account, so that's helpful. Although most folks are very familiar with the OSF, so that is also helpful. And as you may or may not know, you do not need an OSF account to search or find material that is within the general OSF repository or within any of our kind of branded repositories like OSF collections, preprints, or registries. Okay, great. Thank you, Teresa. And I'm just going to move on as you guys are filling that poll out. And also just want to note that if you have any questions about any of the products that we're talking about, we have a lot of the information that you can find on our website, cos.io/tools. As I'm talking, feel free to check out pricing there and more technical information as well. And if you just have questions about the OSF, you can also find that as well and make your account too while I'm talking. You can multitask. So a couple of things to kind of get us started is some basics about the OSF and some things that often are a point of confusion on the OSF. So the OSF is a generalist repository. There's a lot of functionality on the OSF. Some might say there's too much functionality, which can be a little bit confusing if you're just starting. So if you are, I highly recommend you sign up for a webinar series that we have called The Essentials, which leads you through really a lot of the basics of how to use the OSF. Anyone can start an OSF account for free. You can start using it. There's no limitations to how many things you can create and publish on the OSF. And there is a way to register both with your ORCID to link that to your profile. You can also sign up using single sign-on through your institution, which is actually one of the services we'll talk about today. So do check that out and do that if you're here right now and you don't have an account, but it is not necessary. And one of the things that can sometimes be a point of confusion, especially in and around our paid products, is that our terms of service on the OSF specify that a user must be a person. So an organization or an institution cannot be a user on the OSF. And that's important to note because if you are an organization, the way that you can get around that terms of service restriction for free accounts in the OSF is that you can pay for an organizational a service on the OSF. So on the OSF, there are three workflows and three types of objects that you can work within or publish publicly. Some of these objects can also be private, which is the project space. And our registration can also be embargoed for a period of time before it's made publicly available. But these are all types of objects on the OSF, which in the current version of the OSF can be kind of aggregated or grouped in different types of collections, which I'll talk about. And you can think of those as kind of organizational repositories. But if you're just a free agent on the OSF, unaffiliated with an institution, you can make a project, you can make a registration, and you can make a preprint if you submit it to a community-operated preprint service. So what are projects on the OSF? Again, a little bit of a point of confusion sometimes because projects in the OSF, we don't specify what a project is at the project level in terms of its relationship to research or to the life cycle of research. So, they're really just flexible workspaces. You can think of them as, a paper level. You can think of it as a research level object. There can be lots of contributing members to a specific project. There can be files added to a project. It's kind of like a sandbox. You can integrate it with a lot of other tools that we have, which I'll talk about in a little bit on the OSF. Excuse me. You can moderate privacy settings. You can add collaborators or remove them. If a project is public, you can mint a DOI for it. There's an activity log. You can have subcomponents on a project. So the organization of a project, again, we don't specify. So some use the top project level as like, a lab group or a protocol or a paper. And the great thing about projects is they really allow you to plan and collaborate and organize and do the kinds of things that in the beginning of a research project might be a bit messy and require a lot of contributions and collaboration in a kind of flexible format. And a couple of other things that are really important to note around OSF projects, and this comes up often, again, as a point of confusion, but you can utilize our metadata schema with projects to make your projects, even though they are unspecified in terms of their structure, you can make them more fair on the OSF in terms of our search by utilizing metadata and making sure that you're using as many persistent identifiers as you can in that project space. And so that includes, making sure contributors have linked ORCID IDs, that you're utilizing metadata both at the project level, but also at the subcomponent and file level within projects. The cool thing about projects is also that you can set really fine-grained permissions. So parts of projects can be totally hidden to a viewer, but visible to contributors. Some projects have subcomponents that are only visible to certain contributors and not to others. And you can also sync this OSF content with your ORCID record within a project. The OSF is open source. You can utilize our API to propagate data from projects and data and metadata from projects in any way you'd like if you do have the resources to do that. So the second object that I spoke about and mentioned is one of the three that you can publish or engage with on the OSF is a registration. A registration is a time-stamped archived object on the OSF. it is not specific to the OSF. There are many other platforms that host registrations within their registry infrastructure. The OSF is a generalist registry. We're not HIPAA compliant, so clinical data can't be registered on the OSF in the same way that it can be, for example, on clinicaltrials.gov. But many use registrations on the OSF for scoping reviews or systematic reviews. We have registration templates for those. And many different disciplines variably use registrations on the OSF. And there's a lot of intricacies to the framework of registrations as well as pre-registrations, which you might be familiar with. I'll just say that when you do pre-register research, the basics are that you're specifying your research plan in advance of your study and then submitting it to a registry. It's permanent. It cannot be deleted on the OSF. And on the OSF, we also have a number of restricted templates for the metadata, excuse me, for the metadata of your registration. The third object, I won't dive too deeply into, but OSF preprints are kind of a familiar object. They operate similarly to other preprints on other platforms. We actually have closed the publishing of preprints outside of a specific preprint service on the OSF, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to note that if anybody, any user publishes preprint on the OSF, it must be submitted to a community-operated preprint service. But I'll talk a little bit more about registrations just because I think this is something that makes the OSF quite special and is likely one of the reasons why maybe users from your institution or organization are drawn to the OSF or do use it. So on the OSF, you can create a registration from scratch using templates that we have. And I'll note that we have a lot of resources around registration templates that you or your researchers might want to use. But you can also create a registration from an existing OSF project. And the great thing about that is that it pulls metadata files, information from the parent project or the parent subcomponent or component, which is much like a project within that project. So you don't have to duplicate a lot of labor to take information that maybe you're working on with collaborators within a project space to fork it into an affiliated registration, which is a permanent object on the OSF. And some workflows that we often see are that there is a project, it's public, there's a lot of information in it, or it's there are variable permissions on it. At some point in the project, a registration is created and that project is made private while the registration serves as the public-facing part of the research project or collaboration, for example. And there are a lot of other research project management tools, a lot of other repositories that don't have this functionality. And so this is, I think, a really supportive feature functionality on the OSF for researchers who are really deeply engaged with open scholarship behaviors and workflows and really want to make public and visible the work that they're doing in a rigorous fashion. And so that's one of the things that is, I would say, beneficial about utilizing the OSF for sharing open research. So what are the paid services that we offer on top of all of that free stuff that you can do on the OSF with registrations, projects, and preprints? One of our more popular services that we offer is called OSF Institutions. And the TLDR on OSF Institutions is that once you sign up as an institution, and we often work with libraries to do this, we set up your institution so that any user who is affiliated with your institution can use single sign-on to log on to the OSF. And what that means is that those users and the material that they publish on the OSF after they sign on, that's affiliated with your institution, both in terms of affiliated ROR metadata from your institution on their projects or registrations or preprints, as well as visibly aggregating that material in and on the institutional page. And so I'll just briefly show you what this looks like. So this is James Madison University's OSF institutional page, and you can see that they have preprints they have registrations, and they have projects that are all affiliated with this institution. So if I look at a project, for example, from James Madison's institutional page, this public project has the affiliated institution indicated on the project. And it also is within that institutional page. But also, what that means is that anywhere on the OSF, this project is searchable by that ROR metadata. So you can search by projects within James Madison and find this metadata. On the back end of the institutional service, administrators, of which there can be many from a single institution, have access to a lot of data around the projects, preprints, registrations, files, and users that have signed in via single sign-on for that institution. And I'll talk a little bit more about that data that you have access to, and also some of the curation that you're able to do on the administrative backend. One of the great things about our OSF institutions product is that we work with libraries to create institutional guides, libguides, to bring more researchers to the OSF platform. Many of you who may be on this webinar call already have researchers at your institution who are using the OSF. I'm happy to share the public information that I can around the public projects and registrations and preprints that those affiliated users have already published on the OSF. What would happen when you sign up for OSF institutions is that all of that material would be aggregated on your institutional page, and then any further published material on the platform would also be aggregated and affiliated with your institution. And one of the other great things about institutions is that any of this material is going to have the visual branded affiliation of your institution on that material. That affiliation can also be removed for material that by the user or by you as a data curator on the administrative backend. You can request that material, for example, is not affiliated with the institution. Excuse me. So OSF collections and registries operate in a similar way, but not exactly the same. So collections and registries on the OSF are also branded aggregations of material. Specifically, an OSF collection allows you to affiliate and create a organized aggregation of projects only, whereas an OSF registry allows you to do the same for registrations only. As an organization, so in this case, I just have two images here of both a collection, which is the IBD Genetics Consortium, and a registry, which is the Stiftelsendam Registry. They're a funder. The Genetics Consortium is a consortium of research groups globally. Both of these organizations wanted to make sure that research outputs, ongoing research, published research, could be found on a single repository page, and that there were some constraints in terms of what types of material could appear in those repositories. So for both, there is a degree of submission control. You can moderate submissions. For registrations, for OSF registries, you can create templates for custom templates for registrations that you want submitters to submit to your registry. For OSF collections, we can help you create templatized projects, which can be forked and used by researchers so that you have a standard way of submitting projects to an OSF collection repository. And any of the material that is submitted and accepted into either an OSF registry or an OSF collection is then affiliated with your organization or institution. And these are used in different ways by different organizations or institutions, which I'm happy to dive in with you deeper. If you just shoot me an email, we can set up a call and talk. But I'll give you the example here of the Stiftelsendam registry. I'll just pull it up here. So Stiftelsendam is a funder, and they have decided to use registrations as a way to track compliance, but also track their funded research. So all of the registrations in their registry, their OSF registry, indicate different research projects that are ongoing as a part of their funded research. Whereas this genetics consortium, they are using only the project objects on the OSF, and all of the projects within their OSF collection, some of them might be published, some of them might be ongoing projects, some of them are specific types of projects with specific types of study design. So they're using their collection as a showcase as well, but as an ongoing kind of collaborative space for their research. And at the moment, OSF collections and OSF registries function similarly in the sense that they're moderated repositories, but they have very specific functionality. One can only display and aggregate registrations on the OSF, and the other can only do the same for projects. We don't yet have a way to have a aggregate of, for example, projects and registrations, although watch this space as our product roadmap shifts. Also, briefly note OSF preprints. There's been some changes to the way in which OSF preprints have worked over the past year, but very similarly to an OSF registry or a collection, an OSF preprint service, which we variably call OSF preprint service, a branded preprint, or a community operated preprint service. These are ways for an organization, in this case, what you're looking at here is Soc Archive, to have a moderated service that accepts a certain type of preprint. And that might be type based on discipline or some other criteria. But you can have a branded landing page to raise the profile of research from your organization. You can also have submission control. Our pricing for preprints is actually based on the number of submissions you have. So if you have fewer submissions, the pricing for starting and maintaining a preprint service are reduced. And we also then are affiliating all of those preprints with the affiliation of your preprint service. As I had mentioned before, we no longer accept just the publishing of an OSF preprint without its inclusion into one of these preprint branded preprint services. So in the past, users, for example, from your institution may have published OSF preprints on the platform with no affiliation to a discipline-specific service, and we have stopped that capability on the OSF. So if you have confusion about that, just feel free to reach out. One of the great things about the use of the OSF, and one of the reasons why it's been so attractive for individual OSF users, is that we have a lot of interoperability built into the platform, and that will only continue to increase. It's a part of our roadmap that we hope to make the OSF more interoperable with other storage tools, with other citation tools, even with other repositories. So at the moment, we have integrations with Google Drive, OneDrive, Box. We have a GitHub integration. You can integrate citation tools like Zotero. We even have some functionality around integrations with Dataverse. And this can help reduce redundancy and service costs. So if your organization or institution is already paying for storage on a storage provider, you don't also have to pay for additional storage on the OSF. We have limits to file sizes and total storage for projects and users. But if you integrate with an existing storage tool, those limits disappear. Excuse me. And you can see here what that looks like. So this is an example of a project in which you can add additional storage like Box or Dropbox to your projects and have that integration seamlessly allow you to add material to that project, affiliate it with that project, but have it be stored off of the OSF. I'll just show you a couple of use cases here. This is looking at one of our affiliated institutions. So this is the University of British Columbia. And you can see here, we have I have links here, which I won't click through, but we'll be sending this slide to you so you can click through this on your own. You can see that, for example, on a preprint, which is submitted to SciArchive, the authors from this preprint have their affiliated institutions listed. You can see them on the lower right-hand side there. So UBC, as well as actually, I believe that's Princeton University. Can't see it, it's too small. Sorry. And then you can also see that for a project, they have the affiliated institution there, UBC. That's just a screenshot from a project, as well as, and that would also appear as well on a registration. And you can see that all of this data flows to Data Site Commons. If you click through, you would be able to see the UBC's page on Data Site Commons with all of the public affiliated material from the OSF listed there, and as well as entry for UBC and OSF projects in Data Site Commons. One of the benefits to all of our paid services for organizations and institutions is a backend where you can see how many submissions you have. You can moderate material. For OSF institutions, you also have a metrics dashboard. And this metrics dashboard is a really amazing tool that we just built in the past year and a half and released for use for all of our institutional members. And it will be accessible to any new institutional members that join. This is pulling live from our API, so it gives you a sense of how many active users you have, the public and private material that they're publishing on the platform, the total storage, the total file count. It allows you to slice and dice through files and through those objects, the projects, registrations, and preprints. You can also contact users if you find that material should not be affiliated with the institution, or you find that some of the metadata that is published alongside that public material actually should be amended based on your knowledge of, perhaps compliance or some of the other issues that impact the file storage on the OSF. You also receive, as part of the OSF institutions membership, and Gretchen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if this is also part of our other membership, I believe it is, but you receive metrics reports about the use of your service. So that's both things like externally, how often are your pages being viewed? How often are your users publishing material? And that is kind of more of a look back. So you're able to look on a biannual or quarterly basis at where you're going. And this is related to also your goals as an organization or institution. Are you using an OSF repository for your research because you want it to be visible, because you want it to be used, or are you simply using it as a research management tool internally so that others within your consortium or within your organization can track research? Those are important for us and are helpful for us to know kind of what your metrics of success are in terms of the services that we provide. I'll also provide some context for kind of best in show. So one of our organizations that uses our services and that we've worked with over the years is Virginia Commonwealth University. And they've really taken advantage of their OSF institutional membership, but also some of the things that we offer alongside the paid services like training, to eventually build out their own training framework, and including data science lab and data science courses that require graduate students in their medical school to actually use the OSF. And so they're actively contributing to the knowledge base around open scholarship behaviors on campus, within their department, within their school, and then also actively creating new users who are using the OSF as a repository for specific types of research and data. And this is just one of the pieces that we're happy to share with folks who are using our organizational tools, is kind of best practices. How have we seen these tools best used in other instances and at other organizations and institutions? And I'll talk a little bit about membership specifically for OSF institutions, since many of these features are also part of our other paid services. Some are specific to OSF institutions. For OSF institutions, you have an affiliated or branded page. The same goes for other tools like registries and collections. Specific to OSF institutions are single sign-on and an automatic affiliation of public material, whereas registries and collections and preprints require an individual or multiple people to moderate submitted material. So it's more curated versus institutions, which is automatic. All of our paid services include help desk prioritization for issues you or your community might have, as well as a dedicated service manager. Um, and we also do a 1 hour demo and onboarding for anybody that you might think will be using it or might need that onboarding. For OSF institutions, you have admin metrics dashboard with real-time data. You also have moderator dashboards for our other tools, so that you can see, material that might have been submitted to your repository for inclusion. You can communicate with users who've submitted that material, et cetera, on your admin dashboard. Also, we provide quarterly longitudinal metrics reports, access to working group, the ability to provide feedback on feature development. Working groups are constantly in flux, so if you have a suggestion for a working group, or you have a specialty, special interest, or experience that you'd like to bring to the table, we're always open to that. As a nonprofit software development organization, we're open to a lot of engagement with our partners and our folks who pay for our services. And one of the big things that we also provide is quite a large discount on our training. We offer group training for staff, students, and researchers from your institution, and that's what that discount applies to. We're also in the process of just to avoid confusion, we're in the process of launching self-paced training for individual researchers. And we are also happy to work with you to offer discounts to your researchers for that self-paced training as well. The training that we offer can help answer all sorts of open scholarship questions, everything from, what are the tools that I can use, to bigger questions like what is reproducibility? How do I make my research more reproducible? How can I increase transparency? What is a research or data management plan? How can I use the OSF? So training is quite broad and can also go quite deep. And we're happy to work with you to think about how that might help your community or your researchers. I'll skip over this for now, and I'll just talk a little bit about pricing, so we have a couple minutes to answer any remaining questions. So annual service pricing for OSF institutions is $4,999 US dollars per year, and for collections and registries, it's $5,000 per year. Our preprints are tiered from starting from $999 a year, and that's for services which will be receiving between 1 and 100 preprint submissions per year. And there's another tier that other tiers that go on from there. Happy to talk about that if you have questions about pricing, about training. We also offer additional storage. We offer custom domains, and we offer a custom registration templates, which you might be interested in if you are interested in an OSF registry. So we are a couple minutes over, but I want to just take a second, since I have not looked at the chat at all, to see if there are any existing questions that we have not answered. I don't believe there are any questions. Does anyone have any questions for us? Okay, I don't think so. Thanks for joining. And if you do have questions, shoot us an email. We're always happy to answer them. Have a great day.